So welcome to HEPFest. We've been running this for a couple of years now. This may be the first one that you've ever been to. HEPFest is essentially a kind of week-long series of events aimed at parents, carers, students, teachers, and we're here to offer you all sorts of great and hopefully useful information all about higher education, how you get there, what it's like, what you do there, all of that kind of really useful stuff. So thank you for coming to today's session, which is just to make sure that you're in the right place, of course, Key Stage 3 choices and pathways. But before I get started, I think it's time for a few introductions. My name is Jack. I work for HEP. I have graduated. I've graduated twice, very recently, in fact. I did a history degree at Royal Holloway, part of the University of London, and then I did a master's in a kind of history up at the University of York. And I'm delighted to say that today I'm joined by two wonderful student ambassadors from Sheffield Hallam University, who I would like to introduce now. So Ellie, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, hello, my name's Ellie. Like Jack said, I'm at Sheffield Hallam University. I'm in my final year studying a business economics degree. So this is the fourth year of my degree. I did something called a placement year as well last year, so I worked for a bank. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Vicky.
Hi, yeah, I'm Vicky. I'm also going to Hallam University. I finished an English degree last year, which was 3 years, and I'm currently doing a master's in education.
Wonderful, thank you. And Ellie and Vicky will be on hand to answer any questions that you have over the next sort of hour or so. There'll be a chance for a quick Q&A at the end, but if you've got any questions at any point, just pop them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them at an opportune time. Now, I've mentioned HEP. Some of you will know who we are, lots of your students might not. So HEP, of course, is an acronym which stands for Higher Education Progression Partnership. And we're an organisation that works all around the South Yorkshire and Sheffield region. So that's as far south as kind of Chesterfield, up to Doncaster. We even do some work in Bassetlaw and Barnsley as well. And we're here to basically go around schools, colleges, and offer very impartial advice about higher education. So in terms of decisions that you might have to make along the way, why you might like to go to higher education, any kind of sort of, well, things to do with, say, student finance, those kinds of things as well. And I mentioned the word impartial, and in that context, in this context, that means that I went to the University of York, I went to Royal Holloway. I love my time at both of those institutions, but I'm not here to tell you to go to either of those places. Ellie and Vicky aren't here to tell you to go to Sheffield Hallam, much as they might wish. I'm not even here to tell you to go to university at all. We're here essentially to help you make the correct decisions for yourselves as individuals. So coming up today, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what higher education actually is. I'm sure that lots of you have kind of a very clear idea of this already, but actually higher education, I've mentioned university, but higher education is much broader than that. And there are lots of options when you get there. But actually, secondly, there are lots of ways to get there. So we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of various routes that you can take through education. And each of us speaking today have had very different routes to higher education, both in terms of when we've been, both in terms of the decisions that we made along the way. Thirdly, we're going to talk a little bit about the choices that you're going to have to make in higher education. So things like, do you go to sixth form? Do you go to college? Do you go and do an apprenticeship, etc.? So these are all very important decisions that you will have to make over the coming years. And we're going to help you, give you advice basically on how you might actually go about making those decisions. And finally, applying that kind of good decision-making process to your education choices. So first of all, what actually is higher education? In its simplest terms, higher education is when you work towards getting a qualification after you're 18 years old. That's a very simple definition. Now, these qualifications can be gained from lots and lots of different places. So the first one that I've talked about, which is most obvious, is university. I went to university. Ellie went to university. Well, I would say went, is currently at university, and Vicky is as well. But higher education qualifications can not only come just from universities. You can actually get higher education qualifications from certain colleges. So in our region, we have Sheffield College, we have Doncaster College, we have Chesterfield College, etc., and a few more. And you can go and get, you can get further education qualifications from these places, but you can also get higher education qualifications as well. And you can actually do different types of courses as well. So, for example, much like college ordinarily, lots of vocational subjects, you can do higher education qualifications in things like media design, media production, or more practical kind of things like, say, accountancy, for example. So that's an option as well. And another one is actually degree apprenticeships. Now, I'm imagining that quite a lot of you have heard of what apprenticeships are. Ellie, you have some sort of family experience of apprenticeships. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I like to kind of compare myself and my sister. I kind of went through the more traditional route, I guess you could say, going to college and then university. My sister decided after year 11 that she didn't want to sit in a classroom anymore. She really struggled to concentrate for long periods of time. She's much more practical. She learns by doing. So she decided to do an apprenticeship. It wasn't a degree apprenticeship, that would be the next stage. But she did a level 3 apprenticeship in hairdressing. So she went to college on a Monday to do all of her theory and to practice doing the different cuts and dyes and whatever. But the other 4 days of like the working week, she was in the salon actually getting paid as well. So she did that for 2 years, or just over 2 years. And she's now a fully qualified hairdresser, and she still works at the salon. She gets paid like an hourly wage. So they're a really good route if you kind of like that really practical aspect of learning. And degree apprenticeships are getting really popular now. They're quite fairly new still, but it means you get that degree whilst you're working and getting paid at the same time.
Exactly, and it's important to emphasize as much as possible that these are all equivalent qualifications, that they're all at exactly the same level, and that they're all worth exactly the same. So you can go to university and get a university degree, but equally you can get exactly the same level of qualification from going to college and from doing a degree apprenticeship. And what that essentially means ultimately is that higher education absolutely is there for everybody. So in terms of your route to get there, there are so many different options. But even when you get there, you will get enormous amounts of support, both financially and pastorally. Vicky, can I just ask you, what do you know what kind of support is available at university for students?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. You can get support with academics. So you've got, help with writing. Your tutors are always there on hand. I have an academic advisor that I can turn to. The support, even with if you have any problems with housing or financially. Yeah, it's all around. You're never on your own. It's brilliant.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important thing to remember. And that financial support and indeed pastoral support, you can get different kinds of support. So, for example, if you're a young carer, there are there's financial support available for that. If you're a disabled learner, for example, if you need help with exams or with coursework, there are support networks available for that too. Now, I've mentioned choices quite a lot here. Can I just ask Ellie and Vicky both, perhaps going back a little way here, but these Key Stage 3 students will be choosing their GCSE options in the next couple of years. Do both or either of you remember how many choices you actually had? So Ellie, for example, when you were choosing your GCSEs, do you remember roughly how many choices you had?
I know that I had a few. I think there was about 4 optional GCSEs in total, and there was maybe a choice of 12 different ones I could pick. So not many choices at all. And some of them I had to pick geography or history. So even though that was a choice, I was limited to just those 2.
Was that similar for you, Vicky?
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, obviously you've got to take your core subjects, and then there was a choice of technologies and art. So yeah, not overly many, just a few.
Similar for me, really. I remember having, say, perhaps 10 subjects, 15 subjects total to choose from. Well, you might be surprised to learn that there are actually quite a few more at higher education, quite a lot more, in fact. There are 50,000 different courses that you can choose from all over the country. So that's from Aberdeen all the way down to Cornwall. In Cornwall, you can do surf science if that's something that you're particularly interested in. And I challenge Ali, actually, can you think of any kind of other quite fun, interesting courses that you might be able to do?
I always mention my cousin did history and psychology, which you wouldn't really think linked together, but like being at university means you don't have to study just one subject. You can actually do quite like an equally weighted degree. So if there are two subjects that you're really interested in and you just want to learn more about them, you might be able to find a combined degree that means you can study both of them.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, actually, that if there is one subject that you really, really love at school and would like to carry on, that's great. You can go and do that. If there are two and you're kind of struggling to choose between, look out for those joint degree options. I very, very nearly did a history and music degree, and that's something that you can do, something that you might not think are particularly, well, super related, but there are those options there as well. And I'd really, with those 50,000 courses at those, well, almost 400 different institutions, I'd really challenge anyone to not find something that's right for them. And that's 50,000 courses in loads and loads of different types of institutions at loads and loads and loads of different places all across the UK. So I'd just like to emphasize again, really, that with all of the support that's available, both financially and pastorally, and with all of the options available, higher education really is for everyone, and no one should be sat here today thinking that they can't do it, because as I said, you really, really, really can. So how do we get there? Key stage 3, you will, or very soon, well, you're in school now, I would imagine most of you, and your kind of next step, the things that are on the horizon, is the first kind of, well, you've got your GCSEs, of course, and then after that you've got your first kind of major educational decision. You can choose to go to sixth form or to college. Now these I went to a sixth form. These are similar in lots of ways, but can be quite different experiences. Ellie, you went to college. Can you just explain a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, so a sixth form is typically like attached to a school, and the secondary school that I went to didn't have a sixth form. So I chose to go to a really big college, where I'm from in Grimsby. So I'd get the bus to college. It was people from loads of different secondary schools all went there. There was thousands of people. It was really big. But they had loads of different subject choices. So I think typically at colleges there are more options available just because there's more members of staff and there's more students. So I think the college I went to, they often talk about how there's over 200 different combinations of subjects you can actually study. So I got to pick loads of like completely new subjects if I wanted to. So yeah, they are slightly different, but both like we said before, they're both equally weighted.
Absolutely. And that, like Ellie said, just a really important point to remember is that you can go to university from college, you can go to university from sixth form, and like we mentioned as well, you can go on to higher education, university, etc., from degree apprenticeships as well. So once you've made that decision, once you're 16, decided where to go, if you wish, you can go on to higher education as well. Vicky, how did you make that decision, sort of to go back into higher education, but then also to decide where to go?
Yeah, I suppose I've got kind of a different route to doing my degree, because I kind of did some online courses. I did a TEFL certificate and a certificate in higher education. And believe it or not, I didn't actually get great GCSE results. I got into university by doing a higher education access course at the University of Sheffield, and then got onto my degree. So, the options are always there wherever you're coming from, even if you decide to go to university at a later stage.
Yeah, and that's another really great point, that we're looking at this diagram here, and you might be thinking, oh gosh, at 18 I've got to make this decision, and at this age I've got to make this decision. Well, university you can go at any age, in fact. I mentioned that higher education is, any qualification that you can get after 18. 18 might be the lower age limit, but there certainly isn't an upper one. I can say that on my degree, I did a history degree, and in one of my modules was a retired doctor who was, I think, 71, 72. And he just decided to go back into education because he really loved history and he wanted to get a qualification in it. So really, higher education is there for anyone, like I've said, but it's also there for anyone at any age. Of course, higher education and all of this education does lead on to the world of work. That's where I am. That's where Ellie will be very, very soon. And it's a you know, it can be a bit scary. But higher education, as we'll see, can be massively beneficial in actually getting you into the world of work at a place that you're kind of comfortable with. So you're here. You'll be taking your GCSEs in the next sort of few years. This is a Key Stage 3 session, of course, so I imagine there'll be Year 7s here who are probably thinking, oh, this is really, really far away, and might be questioning why we're actually talking about this now, particularly in the context of higher education, but we'll get on to that. But of course, we'll be having Year 9s in here as well, who, if they've not made these decisions already, will be making them over the next sort of few weeks, perhaps months. So 16, that's when you take your GCSEs. Like we've been saying, most of these are compulsory, but you'll have a few options, slightly fewer than you get at higher education, of course. But you'll have a few options to kind of shape how that looks for you over those 2 years of studying your GCSEs. At that point, like we've said, you can go on and go to sixth form or to college, if that's completely your decision, of course, whichever suits you. Both, again, still compulsory. It didn't used to be the case, but it has been for a few years that you have to stay in some form of education until you're 18. But you get a few more choices. So there aren't any more kind of compulsory subjects, but you can carry on those compulsory subjects. So for example, I did an A-level in maths because I really like maths. But if you hate maths, which totally understandable, lots of people do, you don't have to carry that on. So like we were saying, basically sixth form kind of is sort of characterized as being slightly more more academic subjects, I guess, is closer to school. But of course you can go to sixth form and do BTECs as well. And then college, again, you can do your academic subjects there, but then you've also got a kind of wider choice in terms of vocational options. So I mentioned things like media production, for example. If that's something that you're kind of really interested in, college might be the best place to do that. But also things like photography, for example, or performing arts. Lots of those kind of subjects that you can do at college as well. And then on to higher education. If this will load, there we go. Watch them just run over there. It does take a bit longer than that graphic would suggest. Higher education, like we're saying, 18 plus, 50,000 courses, loads of big choices. And actually something that we've not mentioned yet, another quite big choice that you perhaps won't have made, well, certainly might not have made at this point, and probably won't make until if you decide to go to higher education. This is a decision that you'll have to make then. And that's whether to stay at home or to move far away. Ellie and Vicky, can I just ask your kind of experiences of this? Did you choose to stay at home? Did you choose to move further away? And how did you go about making that decision? So if we start with Ellie first.
Yeah, so I chose to move away from home. We don't have a university in Grimsby or Cleethorpes where I live at home with like my mum. We do have a university centre which is attached to the college. So like we said, you can go and do a degree at the college, but they didn't really offer any of the subjects that I were interested in. So I knew that I was going to have to move away from home, which I was quite excited to do, really, because I think it's quite nice to have that independence. I think I was a bit fed up of being told what to do. So I chose to look at universities that were quite close to home. I knew I was going to go back quite a lot, be quite homesick, which I was in first year. I think a lot of people are. So I looked at places like Lincoln, Hull, Sheffield, Leeds, so really close to kind of the South Yorkshire, Doncaster area as well. I went to go visit all of them through things called open days. So that's where the universities open up on like a Saturday or a Sunday, and you can go visit, you can have tours around, you can go speak to lecturers, you can go look at the accommodation. So I visited a lot of those, and Sheffield Hallam was my favourite one. So I applied to that, managed to get a place, and I chose to move away from home and lived in student accommodation in first year. So that was really good fun.
Yeah. And what about you, Vicky?
Yeah, not as exciting as that. Yeah, I kind of just stayed at home because I don't live too far away, so it's just an easy commute for me.
Yeah, and that's something that you can absolutely do as well. And like I said, I mean, it's a decision, and there isn't a right decision, there isn't a wrong decision, but crucially, there is a right decision for you as an individual. So for me, that decision was to move away. So I'm from North Nottinghamshire, but I went and did my undergraduate, like I said, down at Royal Holloway, which is a kind of quite a small university, but is sort of near Windsor, that sort of area, kind of Surrey, on the London sort of border. It's one of those sorts of places, super posh. So that was a very interesting experience for me, both in terms of living in a new place, but kind of getting to meet lots and lots and lots of new people. But like I said, it's a pretty big decision there that you'll have to make, that again ultimately leads into the world of work. Now, some jobs do require a specific degree. Ellie and Vicky, can you give me some examples of jobs that require a very specific degree?
Yeah, I always talk about my old housemate was doing mental health nursing. So to do any type of nursing job, you need a degree now. So she was doing that at university, and then she'd go on to placement. She'd go to different hospitals and do different placements, and now she's a fully qualified nurse.
And Vicky, the degree that you're doing is with a particular kind of job in mind. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I kind of did my TEFL course on the hope to teach English as a foreign language. But to be honest, it was quite hard to find a job without needing a degree, which is why I kind of went for one. But I kind of want to teach as well. So you need a degree to be able to do that.
Exactly, and that's a really important point as well. So there are lots of jobs that require a kind of very specific type of degree or type of qualification. So, for example, architecture, you'll probably need to do a 5-year degree to do that. If you want to be a lawyer, for example, a law degree is pretty necessary. Things like if you want to be a doctor, you'll need certain types of medical degrees. If you want to be a vet as well, but other jobs require just a degree, so not a specific degree, but any degree. So, for example, my job needed a degree. It didn't have to be a degree in history. It could have been a degree in biology, for example. But as long as I had a degree, I was able to get this job, and that's for several reasons. So degrees are good not just in terms of the subject that you're learning, but actually in terms of getting those transferable skills. So things like becoming a more independent learner, an independent worker, your time management. Ellie and Vicky, in terms of skills, what would you say that university has kind of given you?
I think one of the biggest skills that I've developed whilst being at university is my presenting skills. A lot of the modules that I study, because I do a business degree, a lot of them were to do group presentations or individual presentations, which I always didn't like at school. I was so shy. So I didn't like to do presentations, but they really help you kind of gain that confidence. And doing jobs like this as well, I'm presenting now. So if I didn't do it at university, I think I'd struggle in my job. So that's a really good transferable skill that I've learned at university.
Is that the same for you, Vicky?
It is, and I think sort of more philosophical. I think it's critical thinking as well. So being able to understand the world around you and how to communicate better, it puts you not just academically, but it grows your personal skills as well.
Yeah, and again, these are all things that will really help going into the world of work, both in terms of certain jobs requiring certain degrees, but actually in terms of the skills that you'll get along those 3 years as well. And of course, it's not just about skills; it's a really fun environment to be in as well, and that's something else to consider. So what I'll do now, if we can just get off this slide, there we go. I'll tell you a little bit about my own education journey. And like Ellie has said, and like Vicky has said, we all of us who have ended up in higher education, we've all got there from sort of very different ways. So for me, when I was your age in year 9, well, year 7 to year 9, like many of you, I suspect, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. So when I was choosing my GCSEs, I essentially just chose subjects that A, I enjoyed, and B, that I was quite good at. And so those tend to marry together quite well. So I did music, I did history, I did ICT, and I had to take a technology. So I chose graphic design because I'm terrible with my hands, essentially. At which point, yeah, I did my GCSEs, I got my grades, and I thought, well, again, not entirely sure. I kind of had a vague idea that I wanted to go to university, but beyond that, I wasn't massively sure really. And so I chose subjects that I enjoyed and subjects that I was good at. So from my core subjects, I carried on with maths because I was quite good at that. I carried on with history as well, and I started to realise probably over the course of sixth form that history was the subject for me. That's the one that I could kind of see myself going into and ultimately see myself dedicating much more of my life to. And I also did music as well because that was another big passion of mine. At which point, it was time to choose my university. And so, like Ellie, I went to lots of different open days, ultimately decided that I'd quite like a bit more independence and a bit more a chance to see a bit more of the country, to live in a new place. So I decided to go much further south than I'd ever lived before. Did my degree there and then decided, actually, I quite like it up here. So I after that, I went and did a master's degree in public history, which I got from the University of York. So that's on the left, you have the photo of me graduating from my undergrad, and then more recently, the photo of me graduating from my postgraduate degree as well. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of you might be wondering, higher education feels like a very long way away. For those of you who are in year 7, that might be 6-7 years away. You might be thinking, well, why are we talking about that at our age? Well, your GCSEs aren't that far away, and particularly for those of you in year 9, your GCSEs do actually matter when it comes to higher education, and they matter in 2 ways. So the first way, which is quite obvious, is that if you're applying for certain courses, so for example, the next sort of 3 slides, we're going to be looking at various psychology courses and what you need to get in there. So for this one at Northampton Uni, you need a certain number of UCAS points. If you've never heard of UCAS points, that's something we can talk about a little bit later at the end, or ask your teachers, ask your careers advisors as well. They'll be able to explain that in a bit more detail, but we'll come to that. Or you need certain A levels, or you need sort of certain BTEC qualifications. Now you might think, oh, that's great, that's all that I need, A levels right there. But hidden away is the fact that you actually need certain GCSEs to get onto these courses as well. So for this course at Northampton, you need GCSE maths at a grade 4, or in old money, in our language, a grade C, or equivalent qualifications. And actually they specify that key skills or functional skills aren't accepted. So if you have now an idea, again, reminder, I had absolutely no idea at your age. Ellie, Vicky, did you kind of know what you wanted to do at 11, at 12, 13?
No, I had no idea.
Vicky?
No, I think you just kind of think you want to do lots of things. I went from wanting to be riding police horses to doing art. So yeah.
Absolutely. But again, some of you might have a kind of vague idea. If you're looking at, say, psychology, for example, it might be worth just checking, do I need a certain GCSE level, for example? So that's at Northampton. Let's have another look at another example here. So Lincoln Uni, slightly higher A-level grades that you need. There you are, ABB. And they actually specify that not only do you need ABB in any subjects, that actually you need an A, a B, or another B from a very specific subject. And in that case, this is A-level maths. Now, to get onto A-level maths and to do well at A-level maths, it might be the case that you need to get a certain, and again, this is kind of school specific, but it might be the case that you need a specific GCSE grade as well. So that's something to consider. So I mentioned how there are 2 different ways that GCSEs matter here. So the first way, like we mentioned, is that certain university courses require GCSEs at a certain level. So that's kind of quite a hard sort of cap if that sort of makes sense. But equally, there's this kind of softer way that GCSEs matter, which is that GCSEs feed into A levels, and then those A levels ultimately feed into your university or higher education choices as well. So in this example, you need GCSEs at grade 4 or above, which must include English and maths, so quite similar to the last one. But there are others that are kind of, again, even more specific. So this is psychology at UCL, which is University College London, sort of in Bloomsbury. If anyone knows where the British Museum is, it's kind of around that sort of area. And UCL is very, very fancy and requires some very, very strict A-level sort of requirements. So not only you need A-star AA, which is difficult to get. Of course, if you work hard, you can absolutely get there. But from those subjects, you need 2 from biology, chemistry, maths, physics, and psychology. And then there are even kind of more contextual offers and things that you'd have to go onto their website to find out. There you are. And more specifically here, and more relevant to GCSEs, is that now, not only do we need a GCSE in English and maths at level 4, actually that's now raised to level 6. And it's not just English, it's specifically English language, it's specifically mathematics, and we've actually added another thing, which are 2 sciences. So your GCSEs at 16 actually do affect the kind of decisions and choices that you'll be able to make at 18. Now, going back to that route map that we've just talked about, as we were saying, at each point on that map, you do have multiple choices. So it's really important to kind of consider how you might make those decisions. So we're going to use quite a fun little example here. Let's say it's a weekend and you're choosing, you know that you want to watch a film, and you're choosing between going to the cinema, or you're choosing between staying at home and just watching something on TV. Let's say you have a Netflix subscription, for example. Sometimes it can be a simple decision. What do you feel like doing? Ellie, what do you feel like doing? Cinema, staying at home, what are you doing?
I think with the weather we've had recently, I think I'd just stay at home. I wouldn't want to go out to the cinema.
Absolutely agreed. Vicky, same for you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But rarely life isn't that simple a lot of the time. So staying at home is cheaper, but let's say, but obviously going to the cinema, you need to buy cinema tickets, and that costs money. So let's say that one week, for whatever reason, maybe you've broken down and you need to have your car repaired or something, you've got slightly less disposable income, and so you can't afford to go to the cinema. At that point, you don't really have a choice. You've got to stay in. But let's say the next week, you do have money and you want to go to the cinema, but all of your friends are wanting to stay at home and watch a film together. What are you going to do? Ellie, what are you doing in that situation? Say you're wanting to go to the cinema, but your friends are trying to pull you another way.
I think I'd still go to the cinema. If there's a new film that I really want to watch, I think I'd still go to the cinema rather than watching an older film at home.
I think that's a really good point. I think I'm quite stubborn, so I think I do exactly the same. Taking advice is another important thing to consider as well. So let's say that you have decided to go to the cinema. There are 2 new films. One of them is 5-star rated. Let's say our good friend Mark Commode has raved about it. Other films, that are on offer, maybe not so much. Which are you going to go with? Vicky, are you listening to the advice, or are you sticking with your gut?
Yeah, I'll probably take some advice.
Yeah, I think it's because at the end of the day, there are people who are paid lots of money to make these, to give these reviews and help you make that decision. So sometimes, it can be worth listening to people. Sometimes it might not. So how does this actually relate to education at all? So the first thing I mentioned about cost, rather than having the money in your pocket, imagine that you have the grades in your pocket. And the higher your grades, essentially, the more options that you have. So we use those examples of psychology courses. Some of those courses required really, really high grades. If you don't have those grades, then it's going to be very difficult to go there. Just like, if you don't have the money to go to the cinema, you can't go. If you don't have the grades to go to to certain universities, to certain higher education institutions, you might not be able to go either. Making independent decisions. What's right for you might not be what's right for your friends. And your friends are your friends, you know, they might be wanting you to go and do their course with them. But again, you know, that might not be the right decision for you. And that's something really important to consider. Third of all, recommendations and reviews. So in the case of higher education, you know, at 13, you've probably, well, age 11 to 13, as I suspect most people here are, you've probably not had much experience of universities, of what it's actually like to go there, to what it's like to go to any higher education institutions, apprenticeships, colleges, etc. And so it's a really good idea, first of all, not to be able to make those independent decisions, but actually to make those independent decisions on the back of advice that you can trust from people that you trust and from institutions that you trust. And finally, additional benefits. So we didn't really talk about this in the cinema example, but let's say you're buying, say, I don't know, a bag of crisps or something, and that comes with free cinema tickets. That's an additional benefit that you might want to consider when buying that. And this is actually the case with university as well. So, for example, certain universities and certain courses will let you do what we call a year abroad. Ellie, can you just explain what a year abroad is?
Yes, so a lot of courses, it doesn't have to be, say, like a language course or a geography course. It can be almost anything. It basically means where the university will help you go either study abroad for a year, so you might actually study at a university in Spain, for example, or you can actually go abroad to work. So it's just to get the extra experience. You get kind of the grades that you'd get at that other university would count towards your grades at the UK university that you're studying in. But it's a really good way to kind of get a lot of new experiences. There's some really fantastic job opportunities as well to work for some really, really big companies in Europe or America, for example. But yeah, a lot of universities offer year abroads now.
Yeah, and Ellie, you did a placement as well, actually, didn't you? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so another alternative is to do a year in industry or a placement year. So I chose to do that. It was something that I always knew I wanted to do. I actually knew I wanted to do a placement year before I even decided what university I wanted to go to, which was helpful because it narrowed down the courses that I could study because not all courses offer placement years. So I actually took a year out last year and worked for a bank in Leeds. It was all working from home because of the pandemic at the time. Everyone was working from home. So but it was really interesting. I actually got a lot of work experience from it, and I've now got a job for after university with them as well. So it helped me decide what I wanted to do because even when I started university, I didn't have a set career path in mind. I kind of went to university to find out what I wanted to do. So that year in placement really helped.
Yeah, that's great. And I think with placements, especially, actually, it might be the case that you're thinking, you know, if you're, for example, looking into doing nursing, a nursing placement is very obvious, isn't it? You go and work as a nurse for a bit. But actually, you can do placements on lots and lots of different courses and doing lots and lots of different things. So, for example, during my master's degree in history, I did a placement, and you might be thinking, oh, history, what kind of placement can you do with that? Well, I went and worked for the big church in Halifax. I'm not sure if anybody knows Halifax particularly well, but they've got a really lovely minster, which is very, very pretty and very extravagant. And they were doing a kind of heritage project. So I went and worked with them, did a lot of research, which actually helped me when I was, because I've just applied for a PhD, and I included that in my application, and that meant in part that, you know, that helped me actually get accepted onto that PhD, which is really, really great. So placements are tremendous, and you can do placements from loads of different courses and doing lots and lots and lots of different things. So let's kind of bring all this together and talk a little bit about, we talked about a lot about making those decisions. So let's really try and hone in on how you make those decisions. So the first thing to consider, we kind of talked a little bit about this already, is what are you actually interested in? And higher education courses, I mentioned my degree being 3 years, medicine is 5 years, architecture is 5 years. That's a long time. And it's really important that you spend those 3 years, those 4 years, those 5 years doing something that you're interested in. And Vicky, given your interest in education, how helpful, your interest in education, how important in that was it? Or, well, how important was that rather when you were choosing, to go to higher education? And has that interest helped you?
Yes, definitely. I think I mean, it's the same as a job, I guess. If you're not interested or you don't find something, you're not passionate about something, you can't give it your all. I'm very passionate about English, which is why I did my degree. And the reason I'm doing a master's in education is because I want to teach English and I want to understand the theory behind that and be good at what I do. So yes, definitely, it informs what you want to do and it helps.
Absolutely. And related to that is actually, how do you like to study and how do you like to learn? Now, up to this point, I imagine most of you won't have actually had much agency related to this. At school, you don't really get to choose too much how you like to study, what kind of learner you are, really. But actually, going on to higher education, I mentioned those 50,000 different courses. Well, each of those courses will have different ways of you learning within that. So, for example, I did a history degree, and our learning was mostly big lectures of, say, 100, 200 people, where we were kind of sat in a big auditorium and there was a presenter at the front who was always an expert in their field. And that's really inspiring, I must say. But then we kind of blended that with more classroom-based things. So seminars in which you're in a small group, say 10, 15, with a tutor. It might last an hour, it might last 2 hours. And you kind of just sit around and have a discussion. You have quite a nice chat about, in our case, history. And that was really, really fun. So we had those two different things. But beyond that, history was very independent. So we spent a lot of time just reading books, going to the library, grabbing a coffee. You could do that independently, you could do that in groups. And that kind of independence was how I really enjoyed learning. Ellie, how do you kind of study on your course?
So my course is also really independent. With it being a business course, we don't have things like being in the lab or doing practicals. It's very theory based. So I'm not actually in university for many hours a week at all. It's mainly independent work, which I really like because I don't get I've got more free time. I can choose when I want to do that learning. Sometimes people work better in the evenings, some people work better in the mornings. So yeah, my course is very independent.
And what about you, Vicky?
Well, for my degree, it was a mixture, same as you said, a bit of lecture, seminars. So we had a lot of time where we could actually do debates or discuss things and help each other out. But now I'm doing my master's, it's even more that case where we do discuss things and help each other out and formulate ideas and grow them. So yeah, it's really fun to work together like that.
Yeah, and but then there are also courses that are much more kind of regimented, much more kind of classroom based. We mentioned lab work, that those are things as well. So really just think about, how do you like to study, how do you like to learn, and then try and find a course that kind of suits that. And related to that as well, of course, is how do you like to be assessed? Now, if you're doing GCSEs, you might be panicking already a little bit about the prospect of having to do exams. I was quite lucky. I was quite enjoyed exams, bizarrely, but I recognise that lots and lots of people don't. Ellie, do you particularly like exams?
I don't mind. I think I quite like a mixture. So I know when I was looking for a place to study for my degree, different universities had different amounts of exams and things like that. So when I was looking, for example, the University of Hull to study the exact same course, a business economics course, it was something like 80% was assessed by exams, which I knew I wasn't going to like. Whereas Sheffield Hallam, it's quite 50-50 with exams and coursework and presentations, things like that. So yeah, I chose a degree where it was a big mixture of exams and then other assessment styles like presentations or essays.
And Vicky, on your masters, how were you assessed?
It is all coursework, so I've got no exams. So I mean that's great, but it's also kind of maybe a bit scary because it's all very independent learning. But at the same time, you're kind of not worrying about exams and can kind of just put everything on paper.
Yeah, and That was the same for me as well, actually. So my undergraduate was about 75% exams, I'd say, and then my master's was completely coursework. And so there are, like I said, within those 50,000 different courses, those courses are all assessed differently. If you hate exams, you might want to choose something that that doesn't make you do exams nearly as much as my undergraduate was. And finally, we've kind of mentioned this already, but what do you want to do as a career? Now, you might have very, very vague ideas. You might have no idea at all. But if you do know what you want to do as a career, it might be best to kind of work backwards and think, well, to do that job, I need this type of degree. And to get that type of degree, I need to do these A levels. And to get those A levels, it might help if I had those GCSEs. And that very soon you're at the point that you are now. So that's something to consider as well. What do you want to do as a career? But ultimately, all of this kind of these jigsaw pieces slot together to create a bigger picture, which is actually very unique to you as an individual. There won't be many people here who have exactly the same answers to these questions. You know, what are you interested in? I could ask that to the group here today, and we'd all have different answers. We'll have different career aspirations, and once you slot all of those pieces together, you get a picture that is very, very individual to yourself. So some advice just before we start to wrap up. First of all, work hard. I know your teachers are saying this to you all of the time, and they're saying it actually for a very good reason. They want what's best for you. You want what's best for you, and what's best for you is to work hard and try and get the best grades that you can, because those just give you more choices, and more choices are always fun. Think about what you're good at and what you enjoy, because, like I said, you know, these are big commitments. They're gonna, you know, you're gonna be doing these courses if you choose for quite a long time. So it's important that over those 3 years, those 4 years, those 5 years, that you enjoy it and that you're good at it. And finally, we kind of remember how to make those good decisions. Before we kind of wrap up, Ellie, any advice on making these kind of educational decisions?
I think it's really important to not just follow other people. I think a lot of the time, especially when you're at school, there's a little bit of peer pressure to do the same after school clubs as your friends, or to pick the same options as your friends. But even though it is nice to spend time with those people, and you'll still see them around the school at lunchtime and things like that, I think it's really important to think about, actually, are you going to enjoy those things? Because if you don't really like that subject, it's going to feel like a really big chore to actually go to those lessons and to do the exams. And if you go on to higher education, it's going to feel like a chore to actually go to the lectures. So if it's something that you really enjoy, and it doesn't really matter if it's separate to your friends, you can still see them outside of school or college or higher education or whatever it is, but don't just follow them because you feel like pressured to.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. Vicky, any advice that you can give about making these
Yeah,
decisions?
yeah, I think the biggest thing as well is not to stress too much. I think, you know, you do need to kind of follow what you kind of enjoy the most, and follow those subjects that you really do feel passionate about, or maybe explore something new. You know, there might be a nice tech course or something that you might want to follow, and then build it from there.
Yeah, I think those are really, really, really important points to remember. And actually, again, these are individual decisions, and that you'll have a path for you that's unique, that's individual, and not to be afraid of that. Not to be afraid of, creating your own way to higher education if that's what you choose to do. So finally, in summary, first of all, like we've kind of emphasized over the last 50 or so minutes, you do have lots and lots and lots of choices in your future education. But that doesn't have to be frightening. Actually, that can be very exciting. These are all different things that you can go and do. Things like, so many different courses, so many different places. And then even within that, placements that you can do. You can go and study abroad, for example. These are all choices that are both, they can be a bit frightening, but actually are very exciting as well. And you have complete control over what you want to do when it comes to higher education. Secondly, that there are lots of different ways to make those good decisions, and that actually, thirdly, these are decisions that are going to be unique to yourself. So think about what is right for you as an individual. And finally, like we were saying, those better grades do give you more choices, and more choice is always great. Next steps. First of all, all of your teachers have a higher education qualification. The vast majority will have degrees as well. Speak to them. They know you. They'll be there to advise you. Careers advisors as well. These are people whose jobs literally are to engage and advise people just like yourselves about the questions that you're asking. And again, no question is stupid. Every question, has a different answer, and that answer will be very different depending on your individual circumstances. So speak to teachers who know you, speak to careers advisors, any questions that you might have, and actually any questions you might have, ask us as well. We're here for the next sort of 8 minutes or so. Feel free to pop anything in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer it. Secondly, if, like me, you had absolutely no idea what you wanted to do whatsoever, a really great resource is the UCAS website. So you can use that, first of all, to kind of find lots and lots of different courses. We mentioned some of the weirder ones like surf science, but there are also courses that you might not know exist that you might be quite interested in. There are some that, like we were saying about joint honours, for example, if you're really interested in language, but you're also really interested in philosophy, you could do French with philosophy and learn all about French philosophers. That's something you can do, and you'll be able to find those courses on the UCAS website. Speak to your family and friends about higher education, but also ask for their kind of their experiences of higher education. But don't necessarily just listen to them on their own and do whatever they say. These are all, it's research that you're going to have to do. You're going to be drawing all this information together to finally make a decision that's right for you. And part of that decision, of course, is think about your interests and any jobs that might appeal to you. So first of all, thank you for listening. Again, reiterate, if you have any questions whatsoever, pop them in the chat. And in about 5 minutes, we'll have a look in there and see what's in there, see what we can answer. But before that, it's time, first of all, for you to have a bit of a say yourself. HEPFest is running all of this week, but we will be running it again in the future. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to kind of ask you all, or everyone who's here today, if this session has kind of helped you, what you've enjoyed about it, and just any reflections that you have about the last sort of hour, anything that you've learned, anything that you're still kind of questioning. So if you have anything that you'd like to say, please pop it in the chat, and we will be here to answer it and also to consider it for kind of future HEPFest events. So thank you very much for attending. We hope you've enjoyed this session. Like I said, we'll be here for the next sort of 5 or so minutes for a kind of Q&A session if you've got any questions. Again, if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the chat. HEPFest is here for the next 2 days as well. We have more great events today. We have more keynote speakers over the next couple of days as well. For further information about that, go to hep.ac.uk/festival, where you can see all the different sessions, what those sessions are about, and as well, of course, you can sign up there through our Eventbrite link and come to more events just like this one. So if there are no questions in the chat yet, I will get us started by asking a kind of very general question, first of all, to both Ellie and Vicky. What has been your favourite experience as a university student?
I think my favourite one has been moving away from home and living with my friends. So the people that I live with, I didn't actually know them before university. I just got put in a flat with some people that I've never met, which is quite a common thing at university. And luckily I got along with them all really, really well. We lived together for second year as well. So I think just living with friends is such a nice experience. So I think that's my favourite one that's not directly about my degree.
Yeah. And what about you, Vicky?
Yeah, kind of same sort of thing. Yeah, I love meeting new people, and I guess more importantly, meeting people that are interested in the same things that I am, so you can kind of share your passion. So yeah, that's been fun, and meeting professors. Yeah.
I think that's actually a really important point, the number of people that you can actually meet. So at my, just trying to think actually, at my secondary school, there must have been about 1,500 students, which was like fairly big for a secondary school. Then I went to university down south, at quite a small university. So this was considered a small university, and that was 9,000 students. Ellie and Vicky, do you know how many there are at Sheffield Hallam?
I believe there's just under 30,000. I know it's one of the bigger universities.
Yeah, that's about the figure I've heard as well.
Yeah, 30,000, which is the size of a kind of championship football stadium. So if you can imagine all of those people, and these are all people, like Vicky was saying, that many of whom you will share very specific and very niche interests with. So not just people on your courses, but people that you might meet through things called societies, which actually we haven't mentioned yet. Ellie, could you just kind of explain what societies are very briefly?
Yeah, so they're quite similar to your after school clubs that you might be involved in now, but instead of being run by teachers, they're actually run by other students. So you've got like academic societies. So say if you're studying psychology and you really love psychology, you might be part of the psychology society. But there's also lots of different sports related ones. So any sport that you play at school now, you'd be able to carry on at university. And there's also just kind of like hobby based ones. So I'm in the walking society, so we go up and climb up mountains and hills and stuff in the Peak District, and that was something that I was always really interested in but didn't really know it was a society, so I've met a lot of friends through that.
Yeah, and am I right in thinking there's a Quidditch society at Hallam? Or is that at the Uni of Sheffield?
I think it's at Uni of
Uni
Sheffield.
of, yeah, there
Yeah.
are
Yeah, I
some
think
quite
it is. Same as like a laser thingy one as well.
Yeah.
yeah, so there are some that, you know, some sports related ones, but then some kind of quite kooky ones, which can be quite fun. And finally, actually, just before we wrap up, and this is a question for Vicky and Ellie both. Has anything surprised you about university, about going to university, and about what it's like? So if we start with Vicky first, anything that surprised you?
Yeah, I always thought it was going to be very daunting and scary, but I was surprised about how welcoming and easy it is to get into that environment and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me the most was how different it is to school and college in a way. Like the professors and the lecturers that you have, they just talk to you like you're just friends. Like it's like you call them by their first names. You can chat to them about anything. You can email them if you've got any kind of issues with your essays. So it's quite different than school in that aspect.
Yeah, and I think actually that both of those answers do sort of, well, I hope will reassure people that whatever you think of, you know, the kind of fears, the doubts that you might have about university or higher education right now, that actually it's not quite as scary as you think. And all of us who went to higher education had those doubts, you know, but we all went there, we loved it, we enjoyed it, and we absolutely excelled there as well. And I think it's about time for us to wrap up. So thank you very much, everyone who came along. We hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, HEPFest is running all of this week, so go out and check on our website for any future sessions that you might like to sign up for. I'd like to express my enormous thanks to both Ellie and Vicky for coming along and supporting this session. We hope it's been sort of really useful to have, you know, current university students here to offer their experiences, their advice. So thank you both very much, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day, and we hope to see you soon over the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you.